Welcome to this quick breakdown of the Copenhagen Plank. The Copenhagen Plank is a great exercise for training the core and the adductors or the inner thighs. We're going to be training anti-lateral flexion in this position, or not letting the spine bend sideways. We're going to be training those adductors or inner thighs by squeezing those legs together in this position, which will really strengthen the stabilization of those inner thigh muscles. So we're going to go through a quick breakdown, starting with the most regressed version. I like to start the Copenhagen Plank process without using the bench at all if you're a novice to this movement. So we're going to do a side plank on the forearm and knee. There are many ways to progress, regress, variate the Copenhagen Plank. We are just going to be breaking down that very first basic base position of that Copenhagen Plank. With our side plank on the forearm and knee, we're going to make sure that the shoulder is right on top of the elbow. Your foundation is really important in this movement. So if that elbow is too far out away from you and you go up into your side plank, the further the knee and the elbow are away from each other, the harder it's going to be to keep those hips off of the ground. So we want to make sure that we're in a nice, efficient, supportive position with this upper body. So shoulder right on top of elbow. We want that forearm reaching straight ahead of you. Unless that's painful, you could go slightly in or out. And I would like to make a tight fist and punch that fist down into the floor. That's going to keep that upper body activated throughout the movement. It's also going to help lift the rib cage away from the floor. We want that shoulder pushing away from the ear to help engage the lats, which will help pull the rib cage away from the floor. Then we're going to set up the lower half of the body. So the knees are going to be in line with that elbow and the hips are going to be set up slightly behind. And the reason for that is because, once again, we want that base to be as small as possible. And once we lift the hips off of the floor, we have that straight position of the spine. So we're able to sneak those hips in there. So what's important is that as you lift those hips, you're going to drive those knees down and the feet down into the floor. We're going to press those hips forward to fully extend. So that's important because we'll also get the glutes engaged there, which will also help stabilize those hips in this position. So when we lift the hips up, we're driving those hips forward, trying to smooth out the front pocket of our pants here instead of leaving it wrinkled. We're smoothing that out, extending those hips, and then we can hold that position. So once again, the goal of this side plank on the forearm and knee is that anti-lateral flexion of the spine, just like our Copenhagen Plank, and the stabilization of those hips. So we're going to drive down into the floor to lift those hips away from the floor and that rib cage, which is that anti-lateral flexion. We're resisting gravity, pushing down on our torso. We're also driving those legs into the floor and those hips forward to help stabilize. So once we have this position down, rep it out a few times, make sure that we've got that progression. Then we can start lifting this leg and challenging the stability of this bottom hip even more. So once we have the stability of the bottom hip, then we can get into our regular Copenhagen Plank, which is challenging the stabilization of the top hip. So I reach my leg up. If I extend my knee, I can just place it down on my bench or chair, whatever I have stabilizing me in this Copenhagen Plank. So the hips are going to remain extended. The top leg is going to push down on that bench. So that is where our tension is going to help keep those hips high. If I push down on the bench with that top leg, my adductors are doing that movement. It's like I'm trying to close my leg in towards the center of my body. That tension is going to help lift those hips up. Once again, maintaining that hip extension. So if we bring those hips down and go back up into that position with the top leg extended, this is the very first step of our actual Copenhagen Plank. We're driving down with the top leg and the bottom knee, of course, always pushing down into that fist, extending through the hips to lift up. Once we can produce enough force with that top leg and we feel secure enough to lift this bottom leg, then we're going to try to squeeze those thighs together without dropping those hips. We'll hold, keeping that bottom knee nice and bent, and then bring the bottom knee down. That's important. We want to bring the knee down first so the hips are stable before we come all the way back down. So I'll show you from this side. We're going to bring those hips up, extending fully. We're pressing down into the floor and that bench. If we can produce enough force with that top leg, that this bottom leg is just barely touching the floor, then we can squeeze those legs together. We're squeezing the thighs together, so don't let this bottom leg travel forward. Once again, extending those hips, no wrinkles in the front of those pants. Then we can bring that bottom leg down and slowly lower those hips. Now, the first way to progress this movement is by extending the lever of the bottom leg. So if you are doing this on a bench and you have space right underneath where your top foot is going to be, this is going to be the easiest way to progress for you. So we'll set up that base position again. Now, instead of this bottom leg being bent, we're going to extend that knee. So now the elbow is in line with the heels. My hips, once again, are slightly behind, punching into the ground, punching into the floor with the bottom leg and the top leg pushing into that bench. We're going to do the same thing, but now the bottom leg is longer, right? We're going to have to press down with that lever or that foot a little further away from you. So that's already going to make this movement more difficult. And then we can rep this one out. And then eventually we can progress to lifting that bottom leg up nice and straight. And then we can do our isometric holds here, making sure those hips are nice and extended. And then my favorite progression, which is hip flexion of that bottom leg. So can you press down so hard into that bench with the supporting leg that the hip remains extended, the hip remains off the floor, and we pull that opposite leg to the chest. All right. So there you have it. Very simple explanation of the Copenhagen Plank and how I might progress a client to that end result position. It takes time, so keep at it, stay consistent. If you found this helpful, please share, like, and subscribe. If you have any questions about this movement, drop them in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.